It's been a bit of a tough reading week, primarily because Elden Ring came out about 2 weeks ago, and that has kind of taken over my life. But I did manage to slip in some reading, so let's talk about it. Welcome, weary traveler, and welcome to the Hero of Pages. I'm Zach, aka the Hero of Pages, and this channel is the one that is prophesied to defeat the darkness of reading slumps and save the world. Or at least just talk about fantasy, sci fi, and horror books, which is almost as good as saving the world. So, welcome. I'm still kind of getting a hang of what exactly my formats are going to be. Definitely going to do book reviews, and I really like the weekly update type format that some booktubers have used. Mike's Book Reviews. If you haven't checked him out, he does a weekly update every week, and it's a really fun way to kind of keep tabs with what someone's reading, but also get some peripheral thoughts on other things they might be interested in, like video games, TV shows, and generally seems like a fun way to kind of get a lens into booktubers. So I thought a weekly update could be fun. I'm not the fastest reader with everything I have going on at the moment, so I thought a weekly update could be a nice way to break it up, since I'm probably not going to have a book review every single week. So let's jump into what I've been reading in the past week or so. Recently, I finished Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time, a science fiction novel that was really, really good. I'll probably do a review of this book at some point, both spoiler and non spoiler. Um, the kind of basic premise for this book is that it's thousands of years in the future. Humanity's on the brink of extinction. They've ruined the earth. There are kind of two major factions of humanity warring against each other. One faction has discovered a technology, a scientist in particular has discovered this technology, this nanovirus, that allows creatures to evolve at a rapid clip and gain sentience and consciousness on a level with humanity. And so she kind of devises this plan, this project to send a cargo convoy of primates or apes to this other planet far, light years away, that has the conditions needed to support life, along with the nanovirus. The idea being, put monkeys on new good planet, infect monkeys with nanovirus. Monkeys over thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years have a super accelerated evolutionary process, and they become kind of the new humanity 2.0. I don't want to get too much into spoilers, since I'm just kind of, this is just a weekly update, but needless to say, things do not go exactly as planned, both with the plan with the nanovirus and said creatures on this planet. We'll just say, there are other creatures impacted by this sentience that were not intended, and I'll leave it at that. And meanwhile, humanity, kind of, these factions almost destroy themselves and send a last kind of Hail Mary ship with the few thousand people left of humanity to try and find somewhere to live. And eventually, tens of thousands of years later, after being in kind of the cryogenically modified sleep, that humans can survive these long, light year spanning travel distances, humanity, the only planet that seems viable for them to settle on, is the same planet that was chosen for this project, with this nanovirus that has heightened the sentience of some of the different animal creatures on this planet, bringing humanity into conflict with a new rising sentience as humanity is on the decline. Needless to say, super great book. Adrian Tchaikovsky has some of the best ideas I've read in a long time. I think this is one of those sci-fi books that really made me think a lot about what it means to be sentient, what it means to be a person. He takes very unique perspectives of non-human creatures and extrapolates what true self-awareness and sentience would look like from something that is very different from a human. And it was such an interesting mix of the bizarrely alien and wildly different perspectives that still had a human angle. And that kind of makes you question, is that a human angle or is that a life sentience angle? So what does it mean to be a creature in this universe? Who really would be the descendants of humanity? Do they have to be humans to be descendants of humanity? There's a lot of empathy inherent in this book. It doesn't necessarily hit you up front right away, but by the end of this book, it's built enormous empathy with creatures you maybe didn't have that for at the beginning. And I thought that was one of my favorite things. And This book is pretty bleak throughout the majority of it because you're kind of jumping back and forth between the perspectives of the new sentient creatures of this planet, and then the final struggling and failing human civilization in space that is their days are numbered. And so the humanity side of it's pretty bleak, but I will say this book has some very hopeful notes in it as well. So if any of that sounds interesting, again, I recommend Children of Time highly. So that was fun. I finished that up a little over a week ago. Very excited about it. What else have I been reading? I started the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn series this year. There's been a few read alongs, a few other booktubers who've been talking about it, and it's been on my list for a long time. I picked up the Dragonbone Chair and Stone of Farewell at a used bookstore years ago, and they've just been sitting in my bookshelf. Finally decided to read them because others were talking about them, and as a human, I'm greatly influenced by everyone and marketing and whatever else. So I picked it up. Really liked Dragonbone Chair. It was a lot of fun. Liked Stone of Farewell a lot. Not quite as much, but still really good. It kind of had a little bit of the middle book syndrome, but both very good. They felt like a really cool mix of classic fantasy with some modern elements. I think that's what everyone's been saying. So I won't go too much more into that. Maybe I'll do a review of those books at some point. But I started the third book in the series recently, and that is To Green Angel Tower. This thing is a chonker, as they say. Is a big boy. You can see it's I think it's over 1,000 pages, and the text is pretty small. I mean, I don't know how well this is going to show up, but you can kind of see spoilers, I guess, if you try and read that whole page. Text is small, pages are not super thick. This is a humongous book. I don't remember the exact word count, but this is one of the biggest books I own. It's up there with like Brandon Sanderson's Words of Radiance or Oathbringer. Kind of feels like two books in one, and it is broken up into sections. So my plan is to read the first half of it and then take a break and read some other books just so I don't burn myself out. Tad Williams is the author of Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. He has a very beautiful poetic writing style, but it's not the most straightforward in a good way. He very much he immerses you in the scene, but it requires a little bit of focus. Not a ton. It's not, the most obtuse or, it's not the most difficult necessarily, but it requires a little bit of concentration and effort, and maybe a little bit more than your average fantasy novel, just a bit. So I don't want to burn myself out. So I'm going to read the first half of it. So it's broken up into 4 books. So I'll read the first 2 books of Green Angel Tower and then take a break. But that's what I'm currently reading. One other thing I'm currently reading with my oldest daughter is Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. So this is a book that everyone knows about. I don't think I need to say anything about it. And I don't want to go too much on with it because I know J.K. Rowling's everyone's least favorite topic these days for a lot of good reasons. But got these used. Had them when I was a kid, lost them at some point. So got them used to read to my wife, actually, because she had never read them like a decade ago. And now my daughter is kind of the age I was when I first started reading them. So we started reading them. We're getting near to the end, and they get a little darker as they go on. So I'm debating about how should we take a break from reading them until she gets a little older to kind of round out the series. But she really doesn't want to stop. And I do like to encourage the love of reading. So kind of playing that by ear. But yeah, if we do take a break from Harry Potter, we might jump into Redwall next. That's another book I picked up that I would love to revisit. Loved it as a kid, and I think my daughter would like it. So those are the different books I'm reading. Oh, one last book I'm reading. I generally am reading one physical book, and then I always have a book on the Kindle app on my phone, because when I'm out and about at the grocery store in line or public transit, or just generally waiting out in life and bored, I like to be able to read something. I used to scroll, so I still scroll social media, but trying to minimize the doom scrolling, and minimize the vortex of TikTok, and fill that with more reading time. So I got the Kindle app on my phone, which it's still reading on your phone, so it's a little harder to focus than like the actual Kindle or especially a book, but it still works. And I've been able to read a decent amount of books through the Kindle app. Right now, I'm reading Legends and Lattes by Travis. I'm forgetting his last name. I'm like on chapter 2. but I'll show a picture of the cover so you can see his first and last name, the author's first and last name. But this book looked really interesting. There's a few others who've been covering it, Petrick Leo, for example. Um, and this is kind of sold as a slice of life type fantasy story. It's not gritty or grim. It's not as action packed. It's more focused on the day to day life of this former orc woman who formerly was this crazy warrior who fought monsters and slayed things. And now it seems like she's settling down in a new life in the city, and wants to start up her own little coffee shop. And I think there might be some romantic elements involved, but it seems like it's very much slice of life and just chill. And I don't 100% know what to expect with this, but slice of life can be really fun. I don't watch a ton of anime, but there or read a ton of manga, but there have been one or two slice of life stories that I've encountered that I actually really liked. So I'm hoping for some really good vibes and just a nice change of pace from the normal things I read, which are gigantic epic fantasy books or a very involved sci-fi novels. So Legends and Lattes, when I get through it, I'll talk about it some more, but excited to be reading that. Again, I'm on like chapter 2. That about rounds out what I'm reading. Worth noting, I'm also playing something right now. This is taking away from some of my reading time, but I'm playing Elden Ring, which I'll show a picture of the normal cover here. I got the Steelbook edition, which is super cool. So this came, if you pre-ordered the game, this came with it, and I love the artwork on it. I think a lot of people probably know about Elden Ring if you're in the fantasy community or around the video game community. It's by the creators of the Dark Souls and the Bloodborne franchises, and it is this humongous epic fantasy, kind of dark medieval epic fantasy world, and it's one of the best games I've ever played, and it's some of the coolest fantasy settings I've ever experienced. So if you like fantasy, you like video games, I highly recommend you check out Elden Ring. Maybe I'll do a video where I talk more in depth about it when I get a little further into the game, but it's a tough game. Like, it's challenging in some ways, but it's doable, more doable than your standard Souls type game. I think Souls games are more linear, so if you get stuck on a hard boss or fight, you kind of just have to get through it. Whereas Elden Ring is partly an open world. So a lot of the times, if you're stuck, you can go explore somewhere else and level up and come back when you're stronger. So Elden Ring's super cool. It's been a blast. I recommend you check it out. Again, if you like dark medieval fantasy and if you like video games, I think you're gonna have a great time with it. Okay, so let's talk about my plans over the next week or so. My hope is to finish the first half of To Green Angel Tower. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that in 1 week, but that's my goal, is to get through about half of Green Angel Tower. I'll make some progress on Order of the Phoenix. My daughter and I generally read maybe a chapter a day, unless it's a really busy day. And then I'll probably kind of keep picking away at Legends and Lattes whenever I'm out and about and have some time and I don't have access to my physical copies of books. And then after that, I actually ordered a copy of Dolores Claiborne by Stephen King. Mike on Mike's Book Reviews just recently recommended this, and I couldn't find it in the bookstore, so I ordered it online. So that's coming. Maybe that will be a palate cleanser in between the two halves of To Green Angel Tower. But I also have some other books I really want to try. On my shelf over here, we have Atlas 6 that I'm excited about. I picked that up recently. That is another shorter fantasy novel, I believe. Maybe sci fantasy. I'm not 100% sure, but that might be another good one for me to read quickly in between the two halves of this enormous chunk of a fantasy book. So that's it. That's what's been going on here with the Hero of Pages. I appreciate you tuning in. If you've somehow stumbled your way into my small remote corner of the internet, well then it indeed must be fate. It must be the prophecy that has brought you here. So thanks again for watching. I'll release some new videos in the next week or so. And liking and subscribing, as always, is helpful to the channel if you want to. But in the meantime, I'll talk to you later.